The conference room hummed with animated conversation, a lively backdrop of colleagues exchanging ideas and laughter. As I glanced at my phone, its screen flickered to life, illuminated by an incoming call from Tyler. Excusing myself, I slipped out into the quiet hallway, anticipating our usual casual exchange, perhaps a quick check-in about my trip or when I'd be back home. Instead, Tyler's voice sliced through the line, icy and laced with a smug edge that caught me off guard. "I'm divorcing you," he declared, his tone carrying an almost triumphant sneer. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." For a fleeting moment, my breath caught in my chest, the sheer audacity of his words rendering me momentarily speechless. The complete absence of remorse in his voice was almost absurd, teetering on the edge of laughable. My grip tightened around the phone as the weight of his betrayal settled in. "You sold the apartment?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah," he replied with a dry, mocking chuckle. "Nicole and I need the money to start our life together. She deserves better than that cramped little place anyway." The name Nicole hit like a sharp jab, though I'd suspected for months that someone else was in the picture. Tyler's late nights, his sudden work trips, and the growing emotional distance between us had all pointed to an affair. But to hear him toss her name out so carelessly, as if I were the outsider intruding on their life, ignited a fire of indignation in my chest. "Sounds good," I responded evenly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of hearing my voice crack. "My name is Amelia, and until that jarring phone call, I genuinely believed I'd married a man I could trust." Tyler and I had been together for 6 years, and though our relationship hadn't always been flawless, I'd placed unwavering faith in our partnership. We'd worked tirelessly to purchase our cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city, a place I'd fallen in love with the moment I stepped inside. It wasn't just a home, it was a testament to everything we'd built together, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs of trouble were there, subtle fractures in the foundation I'd chosen to overlook. Tyler's dismissive attitude whenever I brought up financial concerns, his habit of brushing off my questions with a charming smile, and a fleeting kiss. I'd always assumed his confidence stemmed from competence, but now I saw it for what it was: arrogance, rooted in his belief that he could manipulate me without consequence. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the appropriate moments, while my mind churned with the implications of Tyler's actions. He thought he'd outmaneuvered me, that he could pull the rug out from under my life, sell the home I'd poured my heart into, and walk away unscathed. But there was one critical detail he hadn't accounted for. The apartment's deed had been solely in my name for months. When we refinanced earlier that year, I'd had the deed transferred, a practical decision Tyler had agreed to without a second thought, lured by the promise of a lower interest rate. He never bothered to scrutinize the paperwork he'd signed, a careless oversight that would soon prove to be his downfall. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my initial shock had hardened into steely resolve. I wasn't going to crumble or beg. Tyler wanted a fight? Fine. But this was a battle I was determined to win. My first call was to Chloe, my lawyer and longtime friend. I recounted the situation in meticulous detail, my voice calm despite the rapid pulse hammering in my veins. "He sold the apartment?" Chloe repeated, her tone laced with incredulity. "Does he even realize he can't do that without your consent?" "Apparently not," I replied, a faint note of amusement creeping into my voice. "He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Nicole." Chloe let out a dry laugh. "Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if he's taken any money from the buyer, he's on the hook for fraud." The word fraud sent a surge of satisfaction through me. "What do we need to do?" I asked, leaning forward. "First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Chloe explained. "Then we'll draft a formal letter to Tyler outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's foolish enough to push this further, we'll take him to court." As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. Tyler thought he'd left me powerless, scrambling to pick up the pieces of his betrayal. In reality, He'd set himself up for a spectacular fall. The rest of the trip became an exercise in focus. I compartmentalized my emotions, channeling my energy into work while mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. The sting of Tyler's betrayal lingered, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching his smug facade crumble gave me a renewed sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Tyler, ready to unravel his web of lies, and ready to step into a new chapter without him. This wasn't just about winning, it was about seizing back control. The flight home offered hours to reflect on how everything had unraveled. Tyler's arrogance was staggering. He hadn't even tried to conceal his betrayal, as if I were merely an obstacle to be bulldozed on his path to a new life. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on my next steps. Tyler thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I'd been playing the long game without even knowing it. Upon landing, I called Chloe as I retrieved my suitcase from the luggage carousel. "I'm back," I said, my voice steady. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked, to say the least, and not thrilled with Tyler. They're willing to cooperate, which strengthens our case. "And Tyler?" I asked. "I sent the formal letter to his email this morning," she said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but I'd wager he's furious." Good, I thought. Let him stew. When I arrived at the apartment, it felt eerily quiet. Tyler's belongings were still scattered about, his jackets draped over a chair, his shoes haphazardly tossed by the door, but the space carried a different energy, as if the air itself had shifted. I took a deep breath, set my suitcase down, and braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. Sure enough, Tyler stormed in that evening, his face flushed with anger, clutching his phone. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, brandishing the letter Chloe had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No, Tyler," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell what you don't own." He froze, his expression a mix of confusion and rage. "What are you talking about?" I retrieved the deed from a file I'd prepared, holding it up for him to see. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. "You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, he was speechless. Then his face twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so clever, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it falls apart." I stared at him, unflinching. "The sale is already void, Tyler. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money." "Oh, and speaking of money," I stepped closer, lowering my voice, "if you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in deeper trouble than you realize." For the first time, Tyler's confidence wavered. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice unwavering. "You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice your games, but I've been paying attention, Tyler. And now you're going to face the consequences." He began pacing, his frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let's be clear, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, Tyler's anger gave way to desperation. He called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that swung between pleading and threatening. Meanwhile, Chloe worked diligently behind the scenes, tying up every loose end. The buyer, furious at Tyler for wasting their time and money, rescinded the agreement. Chloe drafted the preliminary divorce paperwork, ensuring every detail was in place. Tyler thought he'd won, but he'd underestimated me. This wasn't just about protecting my home. It was about reclaiming my life and proving that I was far stronger than he ever gave me credit for. "You're in a strong position, Amelia," Chloe assured me during one of our strategy sessions, her voice steady and confident. Tyler has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the potential fraud charges looming over him, he'll have no choice but to cooperate if he wants to avoid an even bigger mess. Her words brought a wave of relief, but they also stirred a deeper realization about how much I'd allowed Tyler to dominate my life for years. I'd brushed off his dismissive attitude and overbearing arrogance, convincing myself that confronting him wasn't worth the fight. Now, I saw clearly how much of myself I'd surrendered, and I was fiercely determined to reclaim every piece of my autonomy. That evening, my best friend Laura came over to help me reorganize the apartment. We worked methodically, packing Tyler's belongings into cardboard boxes and stacking them neatly in the corner of the living room. As she held up one of his gaudy ties, a smirk played on her lips. "How's he handling all this?" she asked, her tone laced with amusement. "Not well," I replied, a laugh escaping despite the weight of the situation. "He's still convinced he can charm his way out of this mess, but I'm not budging." Laura tossed the tie into the box with a flourish. "Good," she said firmly. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or a second of your time." I nodded, a swell of gratitude washing over me for her unwavering support. For so long, I'd felt isolated in my marriage, shouldering the emotional and financial burdens while Tyler claimed credit for our shared successes. Now, surrounded by people who had my back, I felt fortified, ready to face whatever came next. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Tyler had the audacity to bring Nicole to the apartment. I was seated at the dining table, reviewing legal documents with a cup of coffee, when the door swung open. They strolled in as if they owned the place, Nicole's smug smile radiating entitlement as her arm looped possessively through Tyler's. "So, this is where we're staying?" she said, her voice dripping with self-assured arrogance as she surveyed the space. My heart pounded, but my resolve held firm. I stood, meeting their gazes with unwavering confidence. "No," I said sharply. "This is where Tyler was staying. You, Nicole, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered, and she glanced at Tyler, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising with indignation. I gestured to the apartment around me, my tone calm but resolute. "This is my home, not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back." Nicole's expression turned icy, but she remained silent. Tyler, however, looked ready to explode. "You can't do this," he shouted, his face reddening. "You're being completely unreasonable." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Tyler. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, pocket the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges yet." He stood frozen in the doorway, his frustration palpable, while Nicole crossed her arms, her discomfort growing. "You're being ridiculous, Amelia," Tyler said, his voice now tinged with desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a deliberate step forward, my voice steady and unyielding. "This is my home, Tyler. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know that. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do. So, no, this isn't your home anymore." Nicole's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her purse strap as she turned to Tyler, her tone sharp. "Wait, what's she talking about? You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." He flinched, attempting to brush her off. "It's complicated, Nicole. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I interjected, stepping closer. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That sale is void, Tyler, and as of right now, you don't have a leg to stand on." Nicole's composure cracked, her voice rising with panic. "You mean the money you told me you had?" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" Tyler raised his hands defensively. "Nicole, let me explain." "No." I cut him off, my voice sharp and commanding. "Let me explain. Tyler tried to sell this apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago. So, not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could." Nicole's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Fraud, she whispered, stepping back from Tyler as if he were toxic. Are you serious? Yes, fraud, I confirmed, crossing my arms. And I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't pack his things and leave by the end of the day. Tyler's facade finally shattered. You can't do this, Amelia, he pleaded, his voice breaking. We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out. My eyes hardened. You threw me out the moment you made that phone call, Tyler. You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me. You tried to ruin me. So don't stand there acting like the victim. Nicole's eyes darted between us, her discomfort palpable as she clutched her purse tighter. This is insane, she muttered, her voice trembling. You didn't tell me any of this, Tyler. You said you had everything handled. He turned to her, desperation etched across his face. Nicole, I can fix this. I just need. She cut him off with a raised hand. Don't. Just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the door clicking shut behind her with a satisfying finality. I couldn't suppress the faint smile that tugged at my lips. Looks like you're on your own, I said, turning back to Tyler. Now, let's talk about what happens next. He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Amelia, please. I screwed up, I know that, but you don't have to do this. I grabbed a folder from the kitchen counter and placed it on the coffee table in front of him. You're right, I said coolly. I don't have to do this, but I'm going to. This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drafted it, and I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on. He stared at the folder, his face pale and drawn. You really hate me that much? Hate you? I let out a bitter laugh. No, Tyler, I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything, a partner who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego. I stood tall, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last bit of grace I'm giving you. He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, he muttered, his voice barely audible. I'll go. Good, I said, walking toward the door. And don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts deal with you. As I opened the door, Tyler slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He didn't meet my eyes as he walked out, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his defeat. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the life we could have had if he'd been the man I once believed he was. That moment passed quickly, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with the new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Tyler, would ever take it from me again. The silence in the apartment after Tyler's departure was profound, almost sacred. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely, unburdened by his presence, his entitlement, or his lies. The space no longer carried the weight of his chaos. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his belongings once cluttered the space. His oversized gaming chair, the framed jerseys that had littered the walls, and that gaudy coffee table he'd insisted on keeping were all gone. The apartment felt cleaner, brighter, as if it had been reborn as truly mine. I walked to the window, gazing out at the city skyline that had first drawn me to this place. This wasn't just a victory over Tyler, it was a triumph over every doubt I'd ever harbored about my own strength. I had fought for myself, for my home, and for the life I deserved. And in that moment, I knew I was ready to write the next chapter, one where I stood firmly in my own power, unshaken and unstoppable. That evening, Laura arrived at my apartment with a steaming bag of takeout and a bottle of crisp, chilled wine, her presence a comforting anchor after the whirlwind of the past week. Is he really gone? She asked, flopping onto the couch with a dramatic sigh, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Gone and not coming back, I replied, pouring 2 generous glasses of wine, the ruby liquid catching the light. I gave him until the end of the day to pack his things. He didn't argue. Laura raised her glass, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the heavy burden of the past week begin to lift, like a fog dissipating under the warmth of the sun. To never letting someone walk all over me again, I added, my voice firm with conviction. Over the next few days, I set about reclaiming the apartment, transforming it piece by piece into a space that felt wholly mine. I rearranged the furniture, swapping Tyler's bulky, utilitarian pieces for a layout that felt open and inviting. I hung my favorite artwork in the living room, a vibrant abstract painting I'd bought years ago but had tucked away because Tyler deemed it too loud. I filled the space with small touches that brought me joy, a vase of fresh wildflowers, a cozy throw blanket, and scented candles that bathed the rooms in a warm, soothing glow. This wasn't just about redecorating. It was about reshaping the apartment into a reflection of who I was, not the diminished version of myself Tyler had tried to mold me into. Chloe called regularly with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice brimming with a kind of unshakable confidence that made me feel invincible. The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them, she explained during one of our calls, her tone crisp and professional. But the divorce paperwork is progressing smoothly. Once Tyler signs, you'll be officially free. The word free sent a shiver through me, tightening my chest with a mix of relief and anticipation. This wasn't just about the divorce. It was about shedding the weight of everything I'd carried for years. The resentment, the self-doubt, the suffocating sense of being trapped in a marriage that failed to value me. It was all finally lifting, like chains falling away after a long imprisonment. Tyler tried to reach out a few times, his messages a chaotic mix of half-hearted apologies and pathetic attempts to manipulate me into reconsidering. One text read, "I made a mistake, Amelia. Can't we at least talk about this?" Another was more desperate, tinged with self-pity. "You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that what you want?" I didn't respond. For the first time, I refused to expend my energy trying to salvage something that was broken beyond repair. He'd made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. I wasn't responsible for fixing his mess anymore. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like an entirely new space, warm, inviting, and undeniably mine. As I sank onto the couch with a steaming cup of chamomile tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window like a constellation of possibilities, I reflected on everything that had transpired. Tyler's betrayal had been a gut punch, a shock that had initially left me reeling. But it had also served as a wake-up call, forcing me to confront the truth I'd ignored for too long. I'd let myself believe I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for the scraps of respect and affection he deigned to offer. Now, I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment. I was reclaiming my life, my confidence, and my sense of self-worth. A month later, my life looked unrecognizable, not because of any drastic overhaul, but because of the profound shift in how it felt. The apartment had transformed into a sanctuary that reflected my tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Tyler's clutter, his oversized gadgets, his mismatched decor, his overbearing presence, made the space feel lighter, freer, as if it could finally breathe. The divorce process moved forward seamlessly, with Chloe handling every detail with precision and ensuring Tyler had no room to argue or complicate matters. He signed the papers without much resistance, likely realizing he had no leverage to fight me. There was no dramatic showdown, no tearful plea for reconciliation, just a cold, clean break that felt both bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One afternoon, as I sorted through a box of old papers, I stumbled across a photograph of Tyler and me from our early years together. We were beaming, arms wrapped around each other, our faces glowing with hope and promise. I stared at it for a long moment, letting the memories wash over me like a gentle tide. There had been good times, moments when I genuinely believed we were building a lasting life together. But those moments were long gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and slipped it into a drawer. It wasn't worth displaying, but I wasn't ready to discard it entirely. It was a piece of my past, a reminder of where I'd been, but it no longer defined me. Laura and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown, the city sprawling beneath us in a dazzling array of lights. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Single life suits you." I laughed, a warmth spreading through me that I hadn't felt in years. "It's not the single life," I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I'm living on my own terms, not under someone else's rules." We toasted to that, and as the night unfolded, I felt a swelling sense of pride in myself. I'd faced one of the most challenging moments of my life and emerged not just intact but stronger, more resolute, and more alive than ever. I wasn't merely surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I began planning for the future with a clarity I hadn't known was possible. The apartment had become more than a refuge. It was a symbol of everything I'd fought for and reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one untainted by the lingering shadows of my life with Tyler. Until then, I was determined to savor every moment in the space I'd fought so hard to keep. That night, as I curled up on the couch, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I thought back to Tyler's smug laugh during that fateful phone call, so certain he'd won, and a quiet smile curved my lips. His arrogance had been his undoing, and my quiet, steadfast strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I called the shots, where I chose happiness on my own terms. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly unshakably free. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.